Alrighty, as promised before, I want to go ahead and read this entire article. As a Ford guy, I find this extremely interesting. The article is entitled How Leland Lost Lincoln to Ford. So I'm going to go ahead and read the article here. Like I said, very, very interesting. Bear with the length, but it's extremely interesting. The little-known battle of two Henrys, dedication to an ideal versus big business, by Griffith Borgeson. And this appeared in the 67 Motor Trend with the Cougar as Car of the Year. Henry Martin Leland was as much an American patriot as George Washington, and at least as honest. He was at least as nobly idealistic as Abraham Lincoln, his lifelong hero. He grew up with America, and he was personally responsible for many things for which we should be grateful today. He was a leader of the highest order and paid heroically for being what he was. He paid mightily but majestically, quote, the penalty of leadership. That was the name of a piece of advertising copy that his son Wilfred tore off one night in December of 1914. The son was treasurer of Cadillac and the father was its president. It was Wilfred who had recognized the virtues inherent in a V8 engine configuration and had caused it to be introduced to American industry via Cadillac. The competition howled that the idea was folly and held Cadillac up to ridicule. The penalty of leadership was an expression of the Leland's righteous wrath. It appeared in print only once in the Saturday Evening Post for January 2nd, 1915, but to this day it is held up as a masterpiece of advertising copy. H.M. became a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers in 1909. He became its president in 1914, and in his first address to the body he said, I quote, "It is great to be an engineer. It is greater to be a man, a great, broad, full-measured man. This is the great calling. I have singularly blessed for 30... I have been I have been blessed for 30 years with opportunities of mingling with so-called big businessmen and manufacturers, and I can say to you in all candor and with all the sincerity of which I am capable that I have found them as whole. Of course, there are some despicable exceptions, the noblest, the most generous, the most honorable, and the most just men that it has ever been my privilege to meet," end quote. Life had some bitter surprises in store Henry Martin Leland. In his own brilliant mind, H.M. viewed the machine as man's liberator, not as a master to be served. This was his motivation in devoting his life to engineering. By means of the machine, he would lead his fellow men to a richer, fuller, happier life. After 20 years as a low-paid but brilliant engineer with the machine tool building Brown and Sharp Company, H.M. moved to Detroit in 1890. It's also noted that he invented the barber's clippers. Pretty neat. There he established the Leland and Falconer Company and began manufacturing machine tools, gears, and internal combustion engines. When the curved dash Oldsmobile went into production, L&F supplied its planetary transmission. Seeking to do his client a favor and to generate new business for his company, H.M. designed and built a prototype engine to replace that of the Olds. Its displacement was the same, but it developed more than 3 times the horsepower. Moreover, it was designed to precision tolerances that would provide ready interchangeability of parts, a technique Leland transplanted from the New England metalworking industry. But R.E. Olds was having no trouble selling his existing product, and the new engine gathered dust. In 1899, a group headed by William H. Murphy, a member of one of Michigan's wealthiest families, formed the Detroit Automobile Company. For their engineer, they hired a young mechanic named Henry Ford. Results were so disappointing that the firm surrendered its charter 15 months later. Then Murphy financed Ford's 999 racing car project. This resulted in considerable publicity for Ford, and in November 1901, the Murphy Group decided to try again. They rehired Ford and set up the Henry Ford Company. Again, the results were disappointing. There were frequent personality clashes, and the firm was liquidated in March of 1902. The Murphy Group had disposed of Ford and called upon H.M., by now a prominent and highly respected figure in local industry, to evaluate the plant equipment prior to its sale. H.M. did his job, but also told the group that if it still wanted to establish a beachhead in the budding automotive industry, he could provide his own great improvement over the popular Oldsmobile engine. Beyond that, L&F could supply all the machine components. The Murphy Group could buy frames, wheels, and bodies from other suppliers, use its existing plant for final assembly, and create a marketing organization. The promoters leaped the proposal, and on August 27, 1902, the Cadillac Automobile Company was organized, with H.M. as director and a small stockholder. This was Detroit's first successful automobile manufacturing firm, Olds having returned to Lansing. The oft-repeated statement that the Ford Motor Company grew out of the companies of the Murphy Group is untrue. It was formed later and independently of this group. The Cadillac car was an overnight success, being cheap, $750, economical, efficient, and reliable to an unprecedented degree. This reliability was largely due to the equally unprecedented, in the automotive field, precision of Leland's workmanship. An accompaniment of this precision, and one of its motives was true interchangeability of parts. This, of course, was the whole world's key to unlocking the manufacturing and sales potential of innumerable products, including the automobile. It made possible the mass production for which Henry Ford, ironically, usually is credited. H.M.'s only son, Wilfred, was studying medicine in New England when his father wrote to him, inviting him to come to Detroit to see if he would not enjoy taking part in the exciting and challenging Cadillac adventure. He tried it, loved it, and soon became his father's managerial right arm at L&F. By 1904, Cadillac had already become a small giant and was too much for the Murphy Group to handle alone. At its insistence, L&F and Cadillac were merged under the name of the Cadillac Motor Car Company, with H.M. as chief engineer and later president, and Wilfred as treasurer. By the end of 1906, there had been 12,212 Cadillacs built, the largest production in the world. In 1909, Cadillac was purchased by General Motors for $4.5 million, and the Lelands were retained as managers of the company. Until they resigned from GM, much of their talent and energy went into reorganizing ailing GM products. In 1910, H.M. made a tour of manufacturing plants in Germany and came home shaken by the military atmosphere he had found there and by the obvious appetite for war and conquest. After a later trip to England, he was convinced that the future of civilization was at stake and that air power would be a decisive factor in the winning of the war. On both sides of the Atlantic, aircraft and their engines were being made by hand. In the 8-year period ending in 1916, only 54 airplanes had been built in the United States. I'll take a quick break here and just show you some of the pictures here from the article. That's a 1927 L chassis Lincoln that, as of 67, was featured in Harrah's automobile collection in Reno. There's a V12 engine there for, I guess, a 32 Lincoln. And then this is a stock body Lincoln. It's a pretty cool looking car. Anyways, we'll get back to the article here. As one of the most distinguished figures in American industry, it was easy for him to obtain an audience with President Woodrow Wilson. He told Wilson of the certainty that America must become involved in the war and urged preparation without delay. But Wilson's re-election campaign was based on keeping America out of war, and he was insulting in rejection of H.M.'s alarmist notions. H.M. returned to Detroit and continued to plan for the inevitable. Thus, when Congress declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917, it was possible for Wilfred to be in the New York office of GM's head, W.C. Durant, the next day with detailed plans for the conversion of one of Cadillac's facilities to the aircraft engine manufacturing. Durant's reaction was as bluntly isolationist as Wilson's and more. Quote, "No," he shouted, "this is not our war, and I will not permit any General Motors unit to do work whatsoever for the government." Take a quick break here and to show you some more of the beautiful Lincolns. It's a 34 Phaeton. Guess that's from 39. That was Franklin Roosevelt's, they call it the Sunshine Special. Pretty cool. Anyways, back to the article. The Cadillac Company was very much the creation of Leland's, and their attachment to it was profound. But they tendered their resignations, sold their stock, and went to Washington looking for work. They were encouraged to return to Detroit and to begin the creation of the Lincoln Motor Company, named in honor of the presidential candidate for whom H.M. had cast his first vote at the age of 21. The demand for aircraft engines by the Allies skyrocketed beyond the wildest earlier expectations. To meet this need, the Liberty engine was designed, and government contracts for its manufacture were let out to 6 companies, including Lincoln. As Lincoln was forced to greatly expand its facilities and capacity, outside investments were accepted. One of the men who jumped to invest in the Leland's new activity was William Murphy. By August 31st, 1918, 1 year after the government contract was signed, the Lincoln Company had delivered 2,000 of the 12-cylinder Liberty engines. It is said that the company established a record for the largest number produced in a single day, month, and year, although other manufacturers had a start of 5 months while a new Lincoln plant was being built. On July 31st, 1918, the government gave Lincoln a non-cancelable contract for 9,000 engines with an option for an additional 8,000. Then in January 1919, with the war ended, the government announced that it wished to pardon me, I lost my space there. It wished to end the contract. Whether they had any real voice in the matter or not, the Lelands agreed to help their country return to a peacetime economy. However, they had based their investment on supposedly gilt-edged guarantees. These had vanished, and the plant and its machinery were unpaid for. They paid over $4 million in taxes on 1918 income. What to do with the $10 million Lincoln plant? Go on building engines, obviously, but now for manufacturers of cars, trucks, tractors, and for whatever aircraft demands that might arise. But Murphy, who had made over $1 million on his investment when GM purchased Cadillac, saw richer possibilities in a new Leland-built car, a car even better than a Cadillac. "Build us a car, Uncle Henry," the outside investors pleaded. HM was persuaded, and the company was reorganized. The stock, representing $5.5 million in assets, consisted of 160,000 Class B shares and 24,200 of Class A. The B stock had a market of $3.77 million, and over 100,000 shares belonged to the Lelands. The bulk of the remainder was owned by insiders from the Cadillac and Liberty engine days. After Lincoln cars were in production and all the stock had been sold long since, William Murphy repeatedly begged Wilford to permit his nephew, Dr. Fred Murphy, to buy $125,000 worth of Wilford's considerable shares. Wilford finally agreed. Fred Murphy became a director of the company, and the tragic stage was set. Then, in March 1920, the Treasury Department demanded a further $5.7 million in income tax on Lincoln's alleged wartime earnings. This meant agonizing sessions in Washington until the government's claim was disproved and withdrawn. Due to the prolonged delays by peacetime converting suppliers, the new Lincoln cars, which were to have started coming off the line in January 1920, did not begin until September, missing the sales season completely. Then the car had hardly been introduced when a severe economic depression set and the bottom dropped out of the market, and Lincoln found itself in need of a paltry $350,000 to tide it over the hump. It was at this point that the Murphy faction, led by Fred Murphy, set about driving the company into receivership, hoping to buy and gain total control of the corporation and its asset at a fraction of their worth. Step by grinding and humiliating step, every move by the Lelands to save their company was blocked. To add to the hell, a new administration in Washington dredged up the old $5.7 million tax claim and slapped it on Lincoln. Again, after it had done the massive damage, the claim was withdrawn. The Depression year of 1921 was a hard one, but Wilford found a source for a $10 million loan and had gone to New York to collect it when on November 7th he received a call from Detroit telling him that the government had still another new tax claim on Lincoln for $4.5 million. The loan was automatically killed, and the Murphy faction seized the opportunity to vote the company into receivership. So I'm going to end this segment here, and we're going to make part 2 of this article about Henry Leland.